The wheel shattered into 3 pieces just as the sun reached its merciless peak over the California desert, and Vivian Vaughn knew immediately that her carefully planned journey had just become a fight for survival. She pulled hard on the reins, bringing the 2 horses to a halt as the wagon lurched violently to one side. The crack of splintering wood still echoed across the barren landscape, a sound that seemed to carry for miles in the vast emptiness surrounding her. Dust billowed up around the crippled wagon, coating her dark blue travel dress in a fine layer of grit. She coughed, covering her mouth with her handkerchief as she climbed down carefully from the driver's seat, her boots sinking into the sandy earth. The damage was worse than she had feared. The rear left wheel had not simply cracked, but had completely given way, the wooden spokes scattered across the ground like broken bones. The axle had gouged into the dirt, tilting the entire wagon at a precarious angle. Her trunks and supplies had shifted inside, and she could hear the clatter of displaced items settling into their new positions. Vivian stood there for a moment, one hand shading her eyes as she surveyed the desolate terrain in every direction. The road to Mojave stretched ahead like a pale ribbon through the scrubland, wavering in the heat. She had passed a settlement nearly 10 miles back that morning, and according to her map, Mojave itself was still 15 miles distant. The August heat of 1882 was unforgiving, and she knew her water supply would not last long in these conditions. She was 23 years old, educated at a finishing school in San Francisco, and utterly unprepared for this particular crisis. Her father had taught her to handle horses and navigate by the stars before he died, but wagon repair had never been part of her education. She circled the damaged wheel again, as if a second inspection might reveal some simple solution she had missed. The horses nickered nervously, sensing her distress. She moved to them, stroking their necks and murmuring soft reassurances she did not feel. At least they had not been injured in the accident. She retrieved the water bucket from the wagon and poured a careful measure for each animal, then allowed herself a small sip from her canteen. The water was already warm, tasting of metal and leather. Vivian was considering her limited options when she heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction she had come. Her heart leaped with hope, then immediately contracted with caution. A woman alone on these roads had to be careful. She reached into the wagon and pulled out her father's old revolver, checking that it was loaded before tucking it into the deep pocket of her skirt where it would be easily accessible but not immediately visible. The rider appeared as a dark silhouette against the shimmering horizon, gradually taking shape as he drew closer. He sat tall in the saddle atop a buckskin horse, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. As he approached, Vivian could make out more details. A lean, muscular build, sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes that were a striking green even from a distance. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his clothes dusty from travel but well-maintained. He slowed his horse to a walk as he neared, holding one hand up in a gesture of peace. His other hand rested casually on his thigh, nowhere near the gun belt at his hip. It was the gesture of a man who understood how his approach might appear threatening. "Looks like you have got some trouble there, miss," he called out when he was close enough for conversation. His voice was deep and measured, with a slight drawl that suggested Texas origins. "The wheel gave out," Vivian replied, keeping her tone polite but reserved. She did not move her hand far from her pocket. "I am afraid I am not equipped to repair it." The cowboy dismounted smoothly, looping his horse's reins over a scraggly Joshua tree. He was tall, she noticed, probably a few inches over 6 feet, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years of outdoor work. He looked to be in his late 20s, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of dark stubble. "Name is Yates Calloway," he said, approaching the wagon slowly and deliberately, giving her space. "I've got some experience with wagon repairs. Mind if I take a look?" "Vivian Vaughn," she responded, relaxing slightly at his respectful manner. "I would be grateful for any assistance you might offer, Mr. Calloway." He knelt beside the broken wheel, running his hands over the damaged axle and examining the scattered spokes. His movements were confident and methodical, the actions of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Vivian found herself watching the way his shoulders moved beneath his faded blue shirt, the competent way his hands assessed the damage. "Well, Miss Vaughn, I have got good news and bad news," Yates said after a thorough examination. "Good news is the axle is not cracked, just scratched up. Bad news is you need a whole new wheel, and I do not happen to carry one of those." "I see," Vivian said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "Then I suppose I will need to unhitch one of the horses and ride to Mojave for help." "That is one option," Yates agreed, standing and brushing the dust from his knees. "But it is a long ride in this heat, and you would be leaving your wagon and belongings unguarded. I have got another idea if you are willing to trust me for a few hours." Vivian studied his face, trying to read his intentions. She had always prided herself on being a good judge of character, and everything about Yates Calloway suggested honest intentions. His eyes met hers directly, with no hint of deception or ulterior motive. Still, caution was warranted. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. "I passed through a small ranch about 7 miles back. Fellow named Morrison runs it. He is a friend of mine and he keeps spare wagon parts for emergencies. I can ride back, borrow a wheel that will fit this wagon, and be back here in under 3 hours. Meanwhile, you can stay with your wagon and your belongings. Keep out of the sun under that canvas cover. I will bring back water too in case you are running low." It was a sensible plan, and far better than her alternatives. Vivian nodded slowly. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Calloway. I cannot pay you much, but I have some money for your trouble." Yates shook his head firmly. "I am not asking for payment, Miss Vaughn. Out here, we help each other when we can. Someday I might be the one stuck on the side of the road, and I would hope someone would do the same for me." There was a simple dignity in his words that touched something in Vivian's chest. In San Francisco, everything had a price. Every favor came with strings attached. This kind of straightforward decency was something she had not encountered in a long time. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Yates moved to his horse, checking the saddle and preparing to ride. "Keep yourself in the shade," he advised. "This heat can be dangerous. If you start feeling dizzy or sick, pour water over your head and neck. Never mind about conserving it. Your life is worth more than a few cups of water." "I will be careful," Vivian promised. He swung into the saddle with easy grace, then paused, looking down at her with those remarkable green eyes. "I will be back as soon as I can. You have my word on that." "I believe you," Vivian said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. She watched him ride away, the buckskin horse quickly picking up speed until horse and rider disappeared into the heat shimmer. Only then did Vivian allow herself to acknowledge the flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. She told herself it was simply relief at finding help, nothing more. The next hours passed slowly. Vivian arranged a more comfortable space in the back of the wagon, positioning her trunks to create a shaded alcove where she could sit relatively comfortably. She rationed her water carefully, taking small sips and wetting her handkerchief to drape over the back of her neck. The heat was oppressive, making the air feel thick and heavy in her lungs. To occupy her mind, she thought about what awaited her in Mojave. Her aunt's letter had been brief but warm, inviting Vivian to come help run the boarding house she operated in town. After the death of Vivian's father 6 months earlier, San Francisco had become unbearable, full of memories and the pitying looks of society ladies. Her father's business partners had quickly absorbed his small shipping company, leaving Vivian with a modest inheritance but no real prospects. The offer from Aunt Margaret had seemed like a lifeline, a chance to start fresh in a place where no one knew her story. She had not expected the journey to be easy, but she also had not anticipated breaking down in the middle of nowhere. At least, she reflected, her bad luck had been tempered by good timing. If Yates Calloway had not happened along, she would have been facing some truly difficult choices. The sound of hoofbeats brought her alert, and she checked her father's old pocket watch. 2 hours and 40 minutes had passed. True to his word, Yates was returning. She climbed out of the wagon, shading her eyes as she watched him approach. This time he was leading a second horse, a sturdy mare with a wheel strapped to a pack frame on her back. He had also brought 2 full canteens and a bundle that turned out to contain fresh bread, cheese, and dried apples. "Figured you might be hungry," he said as he dismounted. "Mrs. Morrison insisted I bring food along with the wheel." Vivian's stomach growled at the sight of the provisions, reminding her that she had not eaten since her meager breakfast before dawn. "Please give her my thanks. This is extraordinarily kind." They shared the food while Yates explained his plan for the repair. The wheel he had brought was slightly different from her original, but it would fit the axle with some adjustments. He had brought tools as well, borrowed from Morrison's well-stocked workshop. "This is going to take me a couple of hours," Yates said, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms corded with muscle. "The wagon needs to be lifted, the old wheel hardware removed, and the new wheel properly fitted and secured. I will need to work carefully to make sure it is safe for travel." "Can I help?" Vivian asked. She had never been comfortable standing idle while others worked on her behalf. Yates looked surprised, then pleased. "Actually, yes. I will need someone to help stabilize the wagon while I work. It is going to be hot, dirty work though." "I am not afraid of a little dirt," Vivian said firmly. She removed her travel jacket and rolled up her sleeves, ignoring the voice of her finishing school headmistress in her mind, scandalized by such unladylike behavior. They worked together through the worst heat of the afternoon. Yates proved to be patient and thorough, explaining each step of the process as he worked. He had Vivian hold tools, brace boards, and help him lever the wagon up using a clever arrangement of rocks and wooden beams. She found herself fascinated by his competence, the way he approached each problem methodically and solved it with whatever materials were at hand. As they worked, they talked. Yates told her about his life as a cowboy, working various ranches throughout California and Nevada. He had been born in Texas, but came west with his family as a boy. His parents had died of fever when he was 16, leaving him to make his own way in the world. He spoke matter-of-factly about hardships that made Vivian's own troubles seem small in comparison. "What brings you to Mojave?" he asked as he tightened bolts on the wheel hub. "My aunt runs a boarding house there," Vivian explained, using her handkerchief to wipe sweat from her forehead. "She needs help managing it, and I needed a fresh start. My father passed away earlier this year, and San Francisco held too many memories." "I am sorry about your father," Yates said, glancing up at her with genuine sympathy. "Losing family is never easy, no matter how old you are when it happens." "Thank you. He was a good man. He taught me to be independent, to think for myself. I think he would have been proud that I had the courage to make this journey." "I think he would be too," Yates agreed. "It takes real strength to start over somewhere new." There was an easy comfort developing between them, Vivian realized. Despite having known this man for only a few hours, she felt more at ease with him than she had with most of her San Francisco acquaintances. Perhaps it was the shared work, or the honest way he spoke, or simply the fact that he treated her like a capable person rather than a delicate ornament to be protected and admired. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Yates finally stood back and examined his work with a critical eye. The new wheel was firmly in place, the wagon level and stable. He had checked every bolt and brace twice, refusing to rush despite the hours of labor in the brutal heat. "That should hold you all the way to Mojave and beyond," he declared. "But I want you to check it again once you get to town, have a proper wheelwright look it over. This is solid work, but I want to be sure." "I will," Vivian promised. "Mr. Calloway, I cannot thank you enough. You have saved me from what could have been a truly dangerous situation." Yates shook his head, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Just Yates, please. And like I said, no thanks needed. Though I will admit, I would feel better if I knew you made it to Mojave safely. These roads can be unpredictable." "Are you heading toward Mojave yourself?" Vivian asked, trying to keep her tone casual despite the sudden hope that flared in her chest. "I was actually heading in the other direction," Yates admitted, "but I have been thinking. I do not have any pressing business, and it would not sit right with me, leaving you to travel alone on a repaired wagon. If you would not mind the company, I would like to follow along, make sure that wheel holds and you get to town safely." Vivian knew she should probably refuse. It was not entirely proper, traveling with a man she had just met, even if he kept a respectful distance. But propriety seemed less important out here in the vast desert, and the practical part of her mind pointed out that having an experienced traveler along would indeed be safer. "I would appreciate the company," she said, "and I insist on buying you dinner once we reach Mojave. It is the least I can do." "Well, I would not say no to a hot meal," Yates agreed. "Should we camp here for the night and start fresh in the morning? Or would you prefer to put some miles behind us before dark?" Vivian considered. The heat was finally beginning to ease, and the thought of making progress toward her destination was appealing. "I would like to travel for a few hours if you think it is safe. The moon should be bright enough to see the road." Yates nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. We can cover 7 or 8 miles before we need to stop for the night, and that will make tomorrow's journey shorter." They prepared to depart, Yates helping Vivian check the horses' harnesses and ensuring everything in the wagon was properly secured. He tied the borrowed mare to the back of the wagon and mounted his buckskin, positioning himself beside the wagon where he could keep an eye on the repaired wheel. As they set off, the sun painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Vivian felt a strange sense of contentment she had not experienced in months. Yes, she was still heading toward an uncertain future, and yes, she was traveling through harsh country with a man she barely knew. But somehow, with Yates riding alongside her wagon, the world felt less daunting than it had that morning. They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of hooves and wheels creating a steady cadence. The temperature dropped as the sun sank lower, bringing welcome relief from the oppressive heat. Vivian found herself glancing over at Yates more often than she probably should, admiring the easy way he sat his horse, the quiet confidence in his bearing. "Tell me about Mojave," Yates said eventually. "I have passed through a few times but never stayed long." "I have never actually been there," Vivian admitted. "My aunt's letters describe it as a growing town, thanks to the railroad. She says it is rough around the edges but has good people. Her boarding house serves miners, railroad workers, and travelers. She makes a decent living at it, but she is getting older and needs help with the daily operations." "It is a hard-working town," Yates confirmed. The people there are practical, focused on making a living rather than putting on airs. I think you will find it different from San Francisco." "Different sounds good right about now," Vivian said with feeling. They continued talking as the landscape around them transformed in the fading light. Yates told her about the various towns he had worked in, painting vivid pictures of life on cattle ranches and in mining camps. Vivian shared stories about growing up in San Francisco, about her father's shipping business and the strange, glittering world of society functions she had always felt slightly removed from. "You do not sound like you enjoyed that life much," Yates observed. "I did not," Vivian admitted. "I always felt like I was playing a role rather than being myself. My father understood that. He used to say I had too much of my mother in me, and she was never one for sitting still and looking pretty. Your mother passed away too, when I was very young. I barely remember her. But my father told me stories. She was adventurous, spirited. She scandalized her family by insisting on traveling with my father on some of his business trips. I think I inherited her restlessness." "That does not sound like something to be ashamed of," Yates said. "The world needs people who are willing to take risks, to step outside the expected paths." "That is kind of you to say." "I am not being kind, just honest. Look at what you are doing right now." How many society ladies from San Francisco would have the courage to travel alone into the desert, to start a new life in a rough town? "You might not think of yourself as brave, Miss Vaughn, but I see someone with a lot of strength." Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. She could not remember the last time someone had spoken to her with such straightforward admiration. "Thank you, Yates, and please call me Vivian." The smile he gave her was warm and genuine, transforming his weathered face into something almost boyish. "Vivian it is." As darkness fell, they found a suitable spot to make camp in a small hollow off the road, sheltered by a cluster of Joshua trees. Yates insisted on handling most of the work, efficiently setting up a small fire and arranging their sleeping areas with proper distance between them. He cared for all the horses, checking their hooves and ensuring they had adequate water and the grain he had brought in his saddlebags. Vivian contributed what she could, pulling provisions from her wagon and preparing a simple meal of beans, hardtack, and coffee. It was basic fare, but after the long day, it tasted wonderful. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, talking quietly as the desert night settled around them. The sky above was incredible, a vast canopy of stars unobscured by city lights or fog. Vivian tipped her head back, marveling at the sheer number of stars visible. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Yates said softly, following her gaze. "I have never seen anything like it," Vivian breathed. "In San Francisco, you can barely see the stars through the fog and smoke." "This is one of the things I love about this life," Yates said. "No matter how hard the work gets, no matter what troubles come up, I can always look up and see this. It puts things in perspective, reminds me how big the world is." "Do you ever want to settle down?" Vivian asked. "Stop wandering and put down roots somewhere." Yates was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I have thought about it," he admitted. "There is a freedom in this life that I value, but there is also loneliness. I am 28 years old, and sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have a home, a family, someone to share the good days and the hard ones with. But that requires finding the right person, and that is not easy when you are always moving from place to place." "No, I imagine it is not," Vivian said softly. She understood that loneliness more than she cared to admit. Even surrounded by people in San Francisco, she had often felt isolated, as if she was watching life happen around her rather than truly participating in it. "What about you?" Yates asked. "Did you leave someone behind in San Francisco, Some gentleman caller your aunt might need to know about." Vivian laughed, a short, slightly bitter sound. "No, no one. There were suitors, certainly. My father's business associates saw me as a potential asset, a way to secure social connections or merge interests. But none of them saw me, if that makes sense. They saw a pretty face and a respectable family name, but they had no interest in who I actually was." "Their loss," Yates said simply, his green eyes reflecting the firelight. "Any man who cannot see your worth is a fool." The intensity in his gaze made Vivian's breath catch. She looked away, flustered by the sudden charge in the air between them. This was dangerous territory, she knew. She had known this man for less than a day, and yet she felt drawn to him in a way she had never experienced with any of her carefully vetted San Francisco suitors. "We should probably get some sleep," she said, standing and brushing off her skirt. "Tomorrow will be another long day." "You are right," Yates agreed, also rising. "I will keep first watch, make sure the fire stays controlled and no predators come sniffing around." "Is that likely?" Vivian asked, suddenly nervous. "Not very, but it is always better to be cautious. I will wake you if anything concerning happens, but I expect a quiet night." Vivian retreated to the wagon, where she had arranged blankets in the back. Despite her fatigue, sleep was slow to come. She found herself listening to the small sounds of Yates moving around the camp, the crackle of the fire, the occasional snort from one of the horses. She thought about his words, about the loneliness of his wandering life and his careful compliments that felt more genuine than any flowery poetry from her San Francisco admirers. She must have eventually dozed off because she woke suddenly to the sound of Yates's voice, low and soothing. Peering out from the wagon, she saw him standing near the horses, calming them. In the moonlight, she could make out a shape moving in the distance, probably a coyote or wild dog. Yates did not reach for his gun, simply stood his ground and spoke quietly until the horses settled, and the distant shape disappeared into the darkness. It was such a small thing, the gentle way he handled the situation, but it reinforced everything she had observed about him throughout the day. He was a man who preferred to solve problems with patience and skill rather than force, who kept his word and looked out for others. In Vivian's experience, such men were rare. The next morning dawned clear and already warm, promising another scorching day. They broke camp efficiently, working together with the easy coordination of people who had quickly learned each other's rhythms. Vivian found herself smiling as they worked, enjoying the simple pleasure of competent partnership. They set out at dawn, making good time on the improved road. Yates periodically checked the wagon wheel, but his repair held firm. As they traveled, they continued the conversation from the previous night, learning more about each other with each passing mile. Vivian discovered that Yates could read and write, unusual for a cowboy. He had taught himself from newspapers and books he borrowed, driven by a curiosity about the world beyond his immediate experience. He asked intelligent questions about her life in San Francisco, seeming genuinely interested in her observations about society, business, and the changing nature of California as it grew and modernized. "You have a real mind for analysis," Yates observed at one point. "You see patterns, connections that other people miss. That is going to serve you well running a boarding house. It is not just about cooking and cleaning. It is about managing people, understanding what they need, keeping track of a dozen different details at once." "I hope you are right," Vivian said. "I must confess to some nervousness about the whole endeavor. I have never done anything like this before." "You will do fine," Yates said with confidence. "You have already shown you can stay calm in a crisis, work hard, and adapt to unexpected situations. Those are the most important skills." Around midday, They stopped to rest the horses and eat a quick meal in the shade of an overhanging rock formation. The heat was intense again, but they were making excellent progress. According to Yates's estimation, they would reach Mojave by late afternoon. As they prepared to continue, Yates suddenly tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. Following his gaze, Vivian saw 3 riders approaching from the direction of Mojave. Even from a distance, something about their posture suggested trouble. "Get in the wagon," Yates said quietly, his voice taking on a hard edge she had not heard before. "Keep that revolver of yours handy, but do not show it unless I tell you to." Vivian climbed onto the wagon seat, her heart pounding. She slipped her hand into her pocket, feeling the reassuring weight of her father's gun. The 3 riders approached at a deliberate pace, spreading out slightly as they neared. They were rough-looking men, unshaven and dusty, with calculating eyes that assessed the wagon and its occupants like wolves evaluating prey. "Afternoon," the lead rider said, pulling his horse to a stop a dozen feet away. He was a heavy-set man with a scar across his left cheek and teeth stained brown from tobacco. "That is a mighty nice wagon. Having some trouble?" "No trouble," Yates said calmly, positioning his horse between the strangers and Vivian's wagon. "We are just heading into Mojave." "Mojave, huh?" The scarred man exchanged glances with his companions. "That is funny, we just came from there. You folks would not happen to have any supplies you could spare, would you? We have been on the trail a long time." "I am afraid not," Yates replied, his tone polite but firm. "We have just enough for ourselves." "That is a shame." The man's smile did not reach his eyes. "Pretty lady like that probably has some nice things in that wagon. Maybe we could trade for them." "The lady is not interested in trading," Yates said, and now there was steel in his voice. "And I think it is time you 3 moved along." The tension ratcheted up several notches. The 3 riders shifted in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. Vivian's fingers tightened around her revolver. She could see the calculation in the scarred man's eyes, weighing the odds, considering whether they could overwhelm Yates and take what they wanted. "We do not want any trouble," Yates said quietly. "But if you try to start some, you will find more than you bargained for." "The lady is under my protection, and I take that responsibility seriously." There was something in Yates's voice and bearing that gave the would-be thieves pause. Despite being outnumbered, he showed no fear, only a calm readiness that suggested he was more than capable of backing up his words. The scarred man studied Yates for a long moment, then apparently decided the potential gain was not worth the risk. "No need to get hostile, friend," he said, pulling his horse back a step. "We were just asking. You folks have a safe journey now." The 3 riders moved off, but Yates did not relax until they had disappeared from view. Even then, he kept his hand near his gun and his eyes on the horizon behind them. "Are they gone?" Vivian asked, her voice shakier than she would have liked. "For now," Yates said. "But we should move quickly. Men like that sometimes change their minds, decide to circle back and try again." He looked at her seriously. "You did well, staying calm. That could have gone badly if either of us had panicked." They set out again at a faster pace, both of them keeping watch on their surroundings. The encounter had shaken Vivian, reminding her of the genuine dangers that existed in this wild country. But it had also revealed another side of Yates, the hard competence of a man who knew how to handle himself in dangerous situations while still preferring peace when possible. "Does that happen often?" she asked after a while, when the immediate tension had eased. "Often enough," Yates admitted. "There are a lot of desperate men out here, and not all of them are willing to make an honest living. That is another reason I am glad I followed you to Mojave. A woman alone would have had a much harder time convincing them to move along." "Thank you," Vivian said quietly, "for protecting me." "Always," Yates replied, and something in the way he said it made Vivian's heart skip a beat. The landscape began to change as they approached Mojave. Signs of civilization appeared. Well-traveled side roads, scattered homesteads, the distant smoke of industrial activity. Finally, in the late afternoon, the town itself came into view, sprawling across the desert floor like an optimistic promise. Mojave in 1882 was a town caught between its rough past and its aspirations for the future. The railroad had brought growth and prosperity, but it was still very much a frontier settlement. Main Street was a wide dirt avenue lined with wooden buildings, some freshly painted and respectable, others showing the wear of hard use. There was a general store, a bank, several saloons, a telegraph office, a church, and various other businesses serving the needs of miners, railroad workers, and travelers. Vivian's aunt's boarding house was easy to find. A substantial two-story building near the center of town with a painted sign reading, "Vaughn's Boarding House Clean Rooms, Good Meals." The building had been freshly whitewashed, and the front porch was swept clean, with rocking chairs positioned to catch the evening breeze. As Vivian pulled the wagon to a stop in front, the door opened and a woman emerged. Aunt Margaret was in her early 50s, with silver threading through her dark hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years of hard work. But her eyes were bright and welcoming, and her smile was genuine as she hurried down the steps. "Vivian, thank goodness you are here safely. I have been worrying about you." She pulled Vivian into a warm embrace as soon as she climbed down from the wagon, then stepped back to look at her niece properly. "You look just like your mother. The resemblance is remarkable." "Aunt Margaret," Vivian said warmly, returning the hug. "It is so good to finally meet you in person." Margaret's sharp eyes had already noticed Yates, who had dismounted and was respectfully standing back to give them their reunion. "And who is this?" "This is Yates Calloway," Vivian said. "My wagon broke down yesterday, and he repaired it and ensured I made it safely to town. I owe him a great deal." "Then we owe him a great deal," Margaret said firmly, extending her hand to Yates. "Any friend of my niece's is welcome here, Mr. Calloway. I hope you will join us for dinner." "That is very kind of you, madam," Yates said, shaking her hand. "Vivian already promised me a meal, and I have been looking forward to something other than trail food." "Excellent. Come inside, both of you." "Vivian, your room is ready, and Mr. Calloway, I insist you stay in one of my guest rooms tonight. No arguments. It is the least I can do for someone who took care of my niece." The interior of the boarding house was as well maintained as the exterior, with polished wood floors, clean whitewashed walls, and comfortable if simple furnishings. The front room served as a common area for guests, with several chairs and a bookshelf. A dining room connected to the side, with a long table that could seat a dozen people. Margaret showed Vivian to her room on the second floor, a corner space with windows facing both the main street and the side yard. It was modestly sized but comfortable, with a real bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a small writing desk. After months of uncertainty, having a space that was truly her own brought unexpected tears to Vivian's eyes. "It is perfect," she told her aunt. "Thank you so much for taking me in." "You are family," Margaret said simply. "And I am grateful for your help. Running this place alone has been getting harder, and I need someone I can trust. Now wash up and come down for dinner. I want to hear all about your journey, and I am curious to know more about this helpful cowboy who appeared at just the right moment." There was a knowing gleam in her aunt's eye that made Vivian blush. "It is not like that, Aunt Margaret. He was simply being kind." Margaret said neutrally. "We will see. I have been running a boarding house for 10 years, Vivian. I have gotten quite good at reading people, and I saw the way that young man looked at you." After her aunt left, Vivian took her time washing away the dust of travel and changing into a clean dress. She brushed out her long, dark hair and pinned it up properly for the first time in days, studying her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her face was sun-touched from the journey, giving her cheeks a healthy glow that her pale San Francisco complexion had never had. Her dark eyes looked brighter, more alive than they had in months. She found herself wondering what Yates saw when he looked at her. Was it truly admiration, or was her aunt seeing connections that did not exist? And why did it matter so much to her? Downstairs, she found Yates freshly washed as well, his hair damp and his face clean-shaven. The removal of several days' stubble revealed a strong jaw and a slight cleft in his chin. He was dressed in clean clothes he must have carried in his saddlebags, a white shirt and dark trousers that made him look less like a dusty cowboy and more like a respectable gentleman. Their eyes met across the room, and Vivian felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. Yates's expression softened into a warm smile that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. Dinner was a lively affair. Margaret had prepared a feast to welcome Vivian. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and an apple pie that filled the house with the scent of cinnamon. Several of the boarding house's residents joined them. A retired miner named Silas who told elaborate stories about the old days. A young railroad surveyor named Thomas who was mapping routes through the mountains, and a school teacher named Emma who had arrived in Mojave the previous year. Yates fit easily into the group, his quiet confidence and occasional dry humor making him well-liked immediately. He told the story of repairing Vivian's wagon with self-deprecating humor, playing down his own skills, and playing up the comedy of working in the brutal desert heat. Vivian found herself relaxing more than she had in months, enjoying the warmth of good company and good food. She watched Yates interact with the others, noticing how he drew out the quiet schoolteacher with genuine questions about her work, how he listened attentively to Silas's rambling stories, how he treated everyone with the same respect regardless of their station. After dinner, Margaret insisted on showing Vivian the operations of the boarding house. The kitchen with its large stove, the pantry with its carefully organized supplies, the account books that tracked expenses and income, the linen closets and cleaning supplies. It was a substantial operation, requiring careful management and constant attention to detail. "I think you will take to this work," Margaret said as they completed the tour. "You have your father's head for business and your mother's way with people. That is a powerful combination." When they returned to the common room, they found Yates preparing to leave. "I should find a place to stable my horses for the night," he said, though Vivian noticed a certain reluctance in his movements. "The livery stable is just 2 blocks down," Margaret said. "But you will come back for breakfast in the morning, yes? I make the best flapjacks in Mojave, or so my guests tell me." "I would not miss it," Yates said. His eyes found Vivian's. "Walk me out." They stepped onto the front porch, and the cool evening air was a welcome relief after the heat of the day. The main street was still busy with activity. Miners heading to saloons, families strolling after dinner, the distant sound of a piano playing in one of the drinking establishments. "So you made it," Yates said, leaning against the porch railing. "Safe and sound in Mojave, just like you planned." "Thanks to you," Vivian said, moving to stand beside him. "If you had not come along when you did, I would probably still be stranded out there." "I doubt that." "You would have figured something out. You are resourceful." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I know I said I would just make sure you got to town safely, but I find myself not quite ready to move on yet. If your aunt has any odd jobs that need doing around the boarding house, I would be willing to work for room and board for a few days. Vivian's heart leaped at the prospect of him staying. I am sure Aunt Margaret could find work for you. The porch rail on the side is loose, and she mentioned something about the roof needing repairs before the winter rains. Then it is settled, Yates said, and his smile held a warmth that had nothing to do with the desert heat. I will stick around for a while, if that is all right with you. It is more than all right, Vivian said softly. I would like that very much. They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the bustling town. Vivian was acutely aware of Yates's presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of soap and leather, and something uniquely him. "Vivian," Yates said quietly, and she turned to find him looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I want you to know that meeting you was not just chance for me. I believe some things happen for a reason. Your wagon breaking down right when I was passing by, me having the skills to fix it, us ending up here together. It feels like the start of something important." "I feel it too," Vivian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It frightens me a little how quickly I have come to care about your opinion, to look forward to your company. I have known you less than 2 days, and yet it feels like longer." "Time is strange that way," Yates said. "Sometimes you can know someone for years and never really see them. Other times, you meet someone and understand them almost immediately, like you have been waiting to find each other." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. Vivian felt the contact all the way through her body, a warmth that spread from their joined hands to her racing heart. "I should go," Yates said, though he did not release her hand. "But I will be back in the morning. We have time to figure out what this is between us." "Yes," Vivian agreed. "Time." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that was somehow both old-fashioned and deeply intimate. Then he released her and stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good night, Vivian Vaughn." "Good night, Yates Calloway." She watched him walk away into the darkness, leading his horses toward the livery stable. When he was out of sight, she remained on the porch, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her mind racing with possibilities and hopes she had not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. "He is a good man," Margaret said from the doorway, making Vivian jump. Her aunt chuckled. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you, but I wanted you to know that I approve. I know you just met him, but sometimes you can tell right away when someone is genuine. He looks at you like you are the answer to a question he has been asking his whole life." "Aunt Margaret," Vivian protested, but she could not help smiling. "I am just saying, do not dismiss it out of hand because it happened quickly. Your mother knew she would marry your father within a week of meeting him. When it is right, it is right." That night, lying in her new bed in her new room in her new life, Vivian stared at the ceiling and thought about Yates Calloway. She thought about his green eyes and his gentle hands and his quiet strength. She thought about the way he had protected her without making her feel weak, the way he had worked beside her without condescension, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words truly mattered. She had come to Mojave hoping for a fresh start, a chance to build a new life. She had not expected to find someone who made her heart race, and her carefully constructed plans seemed suddenly flexible. But here she was, lying awake because she could not stop thinking about a cowboy who had appeared at exactly the right moment, as if summoned by fate itself. The next morning, Vivian was up early, helping Margaret prepare breakfast for the boarding house guests. She found herself constantly glancing at the door, wondering when Yates would arrive. When he finally appeared, freshly washed and smiling, her heart did a happy flip that she could not suppress. "Good morning," he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. "I hope I am not too early." "Perfect timing," Margaret said, sliding a stack of flapjacks onto a platter. "Vivian, show Mr. Calloway where to sit." The breakfast was delicious and the conversation flowed easily. Afterward, Yates and Margaret discussed the repairs the boarding house needed. She had quite a list: the loose porch rail, several roof shingles that needed replacing, a door that stuck, a window that would not open, and various other small but important maintenance issues. "I can have all of that done in 3 or 4 days, Yates estimated. "If you can spare a room for that long, I would consider it fair payment." "Done," Margaret said immediately. "And you will take meals with us as well. A working man needs proper food." As Margaret headed back to her morning tasks, Yates turned to Vivian. "Would you like to help? I could use an extra pair of hands and it would give us a chance to talk." "I would love to," Vivian said, perhaps too quickly. Margaret shot her a knowing smile from across the room. They spent the morning working together, starting with the porch rail. As they worked, they continued the conversation they had begun on the trail, delving deeper into their hopes and dreams. Yates spoke about his desire to eventually buy a small ranch. Nothing grand, just enough land to raise horses and live independently. Vivian shared her nervousness about running the boarding house, but also her excitement at the challenge. "You are going to be wonderful at it," Yates said as he hammered a new nail into the railing. "You have a natural way with people. I watched you at breakfast, how you drew out that shy surveyor, made him feel comfortable. That is a gift." "I learned from my father," Vivian said. "He always said that everyone has a story worth hearing if you take the time to listen." As the days passed, a comfortable routine developed. Yates worked on repairs during the day, and Vivian helped when she could while learning the operations of the boarding house from her aunt. In the evenings, after dinner, Yates and Vivian would sit on the porch and talk, their conversations ranging from light-hearted banter to deep discussions about their pasts and their futures. The other residents of the boarding house quickly accepted Yates as part of the household. He helped Sela's repair a broken pocket watch, gave Thomas advice on dealing with difficult terrain, and built a new bookshelf for Emma's growing collection of schoolbooks. His quiet competence and genuine kindness made him popular with everyone. But it was his growing relationship with Vivian that interested the household most. They were not obvious about it, but the connection between them was clear to anyone who cared to look. The way their eyes met across a room, the small smiles they shared, the way they always seemed to gravitate toward each other. On the 4th evening, Yates finished the last of his repairs. The boarding house was in better condition than it had been in years, every door hanging straight, every window opening smoothly, the roof secure against the coming winter rains. "I cannot thank you enough," Margaret said, inspecting his work with approval. "You have done the work of 3 men in 4 days. This place will be solid for years to come." "It was my pleasure," Yates said. "You have a good operation here, madam. Your guests are well cared for, and it shows." That evening, after dinner, Yates asked Vivian to take a walk with him. They strolled through the town as the sun set, painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Mojave was settling in for the night, the businesses closing up, families gathering in their homes, the saloons beginning their evening activities. They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open desert. Yates was quiet, and Vivian sensed he had something on his mind. They stood together looking out at the vast landscape, beautiful in its harshness. "I finished all the work your aunt had for me," Yates said finally. "Which means I should probably move on, find new work somewhere." Vivian's heart sank, though she tried to keep her voice steady. "Where will you go?" "That is the question I have been wrestling with," Yates said. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Vivian, these past few days have been the best I have had in longer than I can remember. Getting to know you, being around you, it has made me realize something important." "What is that?" Vivian asked, her voice barely steady. "I do not want to leave. I do not want to go back to drifting from place to place, always moving, never putting down roots. I want to stay here in Mojave near you. I want to see where this connection between us might lead." "Oh, Yates," Vivian breathed, relief and joy flooding through her. "I have been dreading you leaving. I know we have not known each other long, but I care about you, more than I probably should." "There is no should about it," Yates said, his thumbs stroking gently over her knuckles. "Feelings do not follow a timeline. What I feel for you is real, whether it has been 4 days or 4 years." "What do you feel?" Vivian asked, needing to hear him say it. "I am falling in love with you, Vivian Vaughn," Yates said simply. "Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, determined and strong even in the middle of nowhere. You are like no one I have ever met. You are smart and kind and brave, and when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found the place I am supposed to be." Tears pricked at Vivian's eyes, happy tears this time. "I am falling in love with you too. You make me feel seen, truly seen in a way I never have before. You treat me like a partner, not a decoration. You make me laugh and you make me feel safe, and when I think about my future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it." Yates pulled her closer, releasing her hands to wrap his arms around her waist. Vivian's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "Can I kiss you?" Yates asked softly. "Yes," Vivian whispered. "Please." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Vivian only rose on her toes to meet him halfway. When their lips touched, it was like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, learning each other. Then it deepened, becoming something more passionate, more promising. Vivian's hands slid up to curl around his neck, and his arms tightened around her waist, pulling her flush against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably ask your aunt for permission to court you properly," he said with a slightly shaky laugh. "I think she would be disappointed if you did not," Vivian said, smiling. "She has been making comments all week about what a good man you are." "What do you think?" Yates asked. "Am I a good man?" "The best man I have ever known," Vivian said honestly. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, neither wanting to break the physical connection between them. On the porch, they found Margaret sitting in one of the rocking chairs, clearly waiting for them despite the late hour. "Aunt Margaret," Yates said, suddenly looking nervous in a way Vivian had never seen. "I would like your permission to court your niece." "It is about time you asked," Margaret said with a smile. "I was beginning to think you two would just moon at each other forever. Yes, Mr. Calloway, you have my permission and my blessing, but I want you to know that Vivian is very dear to me. If you hurt her, you will answer to me." "I would never hurt her," Yates said seriously. "I cannot promise that life will always be easy, but I can promise that I will always respect her, protect her, and do my best to make her happy." "That is all I needed to hear," Margaret said. "Now it is late and you two should get some rest. Tomorrow is a new day." Over the following weeks, Yates and Vivian's courtship blossomed. Yates found work at a nearby ranch, breaking horses and doing general cowboy work, but he spent every evening at the boarding house. He and Vivian took walks, attended the occasional town social, and spent countless hours talking on the porch. Vivian threw herself into learning the boarding house business, and Margaret was pleased with her progress. Vivian had a natural talent for the work, managing the finances with precision, keeping the household running smoothly, and making the guests feel welcome and cared for. Margaret began to talk about retiring in a few years, turning the entire operation over to Vivian. As autumn arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the occasional rain, Yates and Vivian's relationship deepened. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's moods. They had their first disagreement, a minor tiff about whether to attend a town dance, and learned how to talk through differences with respect and patience. They met each other's friends, became part of each other's daily lives. 3 months after their first meeting, Yates took Vivian on a picnic to a spot he had found in the desert, a small oasis with a spring and a cluster of cottonwood trees. They spread a blanket in the shade and enjoyed the meal Margaret had packed for them. After eating, they lay side by side, looking up through the leaves at the brilliant blue sky. "Vivian," Yates said, rolling onto his side to face her, "I need to ask you something important." Vivian turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" "I have been saving my money," Yates said. "Every dollar I can spare. I found a piece of land for sale, 20 acres about 5 miles from town. It has water, good grazing, enough flat land to build a house. It is not much, but it is a start." "That sounds wonderful," Vivian said, wondering where he was going with this. "I want to buy that land," Yates continued. "I want to build a home there, raise horses, maybe run a few cattle. But more than that, I want to share that life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to build a future together, raise a family together." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "Vivian Vaughn, will you marry me?" Vivian's eyes filled with tears as joy exploded in her chest. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was full of promise and passion. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "I love you so much," Vivian said, touching his face gently. "I cannot wait to start our life together." "I love you too," Yates said. "You have changed everything for me. Before I met you, I was just drifting, surviving but not really living. You have given me purpose, a reason to build something permanent." They returned to town and shared the news with Margaret, who cried happy tears and immediately started planning the wedding. Word spread quickly through the boarding house and then through the town. The community embraced the upcoming marriage, delighted by the love story of the stranded woman and the cowboy who had rescued her. The wedding took place on a clear December day in the small church at the center of Mojave. The entire town seemed to turn out for the celebration. Vivian wore a simple but elegant white dress that Margaret had helped her sew, and Yates wore a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. As Vivian walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm, she looked at Yates waiting for her at the altar. His eyes were bright with emotion, and the love on his face took her breath away. This was the man she would spend her life with, the partner she had not even known she was looking for. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through all the challenges life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes in the congregation. The reception was held at the boarding house, with Margaret and the other residents hosting a feast for the newlyweds and their guests. There was music and dancing and laughter. Silas gave a rambling toast about true love and second chances. Emma cried happy tears. Thomas played his harmonica while couples danced in the common room. As the evening wound down, Yates and Vivian slipped away from the party. Yates had rented a room at a different boarding house for their wedding night, wanting to give Vivian privacy and romance. The room was small but clean, with a comfortable bed and candles that cast a warm glow. "Hello, wife," Yates said softly, pulling Vivian into his arms. "Hello, husband," Vivian replied, smiling up at him. They came together with passion and tenderness, learning each other in this new, intimate way. Yates was patient and gentle, making sure Vivian felt cherished and safe. The love between them transformed the physical act into something beautiful and sacred, a joining that went beyond mere bodies to touch their very souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Vivian's head resting on Yates's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" Yates asked, his fingers trailing gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Vivian said honestly. "When my wagon broke down that day, I thought it was the worst luck. But it brought me to you, so it was actually the best thing that could have happened." "I think about that sometimes," Yates said. "What if I had taken a different road that day? What if I had been an hour earlier or later? We might never have met." "But we did meet," Vivian said, propping herself up to look at him. "And I believe we were meant to. Some things are just fate." "Then I am grateful to fate," Yates said, pulling her down for a kiss. The next months were busy with building their new life together. Yates bought the land he had found and began construction on their house. It was hard work, but many members of the community pitched in to help. The men from the boarding house came out on weekends to raise walls and build a roof. Margaret donated furniture and household items. Emma organized the women of the town to have a quilting bee, creating beautiful bed covers for the new home. Vivian continued working at the boarding house during the day while Yates worked on their land. In the evenings, they would ride out together to check on the progress of the house, planning where each room would be, discussing their dreams for the future. By spring, the house was finished. It was a simple structure, 2 stories with a wraparound porch, but it was solid and well built, a true home. They moved in on a sunny April day, carrying their belongings through the door together. That night they sat on their new porch, watching the sun set over their land. Yates had his arm around Vivian and she leaned into his warmth, feeling completely content. "We did it," Yates said. "We built a home." "Yes, we did," Vivian agreed, "and this is just the beginning." Over the next year they established their ranch. Yates acquired his first horses, breaking them gently and training them well. Word spread about his skill with horses, and soon people were bringing him animals to train, paying good money for his expertise. Vivian managed their household finances with the same skill she had shown at the boarding house, making sure they lived within their means while still saving for expansion. Vivian still helped her aunt at the boarding house several days a week, enjoying the work and maintaining her connection to the town. Margaret was getting older, and she had made it clear that she wanted Vivian to eventually take over the business. Together, they worked out an arrangement where Vivian would gradually assume more responsibility over the coming years. One evening in late autumn, Vivian had exciting news to share with Yates. She waited until after dinner when they were sitting together in the parlor, Yates reading a newspaper while she worked on mending a shirt. "Yates," she said, setting down her sewing, "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, alerted by something in her tone. "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby," Vivian said, watching his face carefully. "The doctor confirmed it today. We are going to be parents next spring." Yates's expression transformed, joy and wonder spreading across his features. He set down the newspaper and moved to her chair, kneeling beside it and taking her hands. "Vivian, that is wonderful. Are you happy about it?" "I am terrified and thrilled," Vivian admitted with a laugh. "I have no idea how to be a mother, but I want this. I want a family with you." "We will figure it out together," Yates promised, kissing her gently. just like we have figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed well. Vivian continued her usual activities, though she gradually cut back on her hours at the boarding house as her body changed. Yates was attentive and protective without being overbearing, making sure she had everything she needed. They prepared a nursery in the upstairs bedroom, painting it a cheerful yellow and filling it with a cradle Yates built himself. In April of 1884, Vivian went into labor. Margaret came to stay with them, bringing her experience as a midwife. Emma came too, offering support and encouragement. Yates paced nervously in the hallway, not allowed in the birthing room according to custom, but desperate to know what was happening. After 12 hours of labor, Vivian gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When Margaret finally let Yates into the room, he found his wife exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the quilts the town women had made. "Meet your son," Vivian said softly, her eyes shining with tears. Yates approached the bed carefully, sitting beside Vivian and looking down at the tiny face of their child. The baby had a wisp of dark hair and his eyes were squeezed shut. One tiny fist waved in the air, and Yates carefully extended a finger, marveling when the baby's hand closed around it. "He is perfect," Yates breathed. "You are both perfect." They named him James after Yates's father. The baby was healthy and strong with good lungs that he demonstrated frequently, especially at night. Those early months were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and constant feedings, but also with moments of pure joy. Watching Yates hold their son with such gentle care, seeing the love on his face, made Vivian fall even more deeply in love with her husband. As James grew, their home filled with laughter and life. Yates taught his son to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, setting him on the gentlest mare and leading her around the corral. Vivian watched them together, her heart full, already imagining more children filling their home. Their family grew over the next several years. A daughter came 2 years after James, a beautiful girl with her father's green eyes whom they named Sarah. Then another son, Michael, and finally another daughter, Elizabeth. The house that had seemed spacious for two now bustled with the chaos of 4 children, and Vivian and Yates would not have had it any other way. The ranch prospered. Yates's reputation as a horse trainer grew, and he was able to hire help, taking on a young cowboy named Ben who proved reliable and hardworking. They expanded their herd, adding cattle to their operation. The land that had seemed like such a humble beginning now supported a thriving business. Vivian eventually took over full ownership of the boarding house when Margaret retired at 60. She managed it with the help of a capable staff, visiting several times a week to oversee operations while still prioritizing her time with her family. The boarding house continued to thrive under her management, known throughout the region for its cleanliness, good food, and welcoming atmosphere. On their 10th anniversary, Yates surprised Vivian with a trip back to the spot where he had proposed. They left the children with Margaret for the day and rode out to the little oasis in the desert. It was exactly as Vivian remembered it, peaceful and beautiful. They spread a blanket under the cottonwood trees, just as they had that first time. Vivian was 33 now and Yates was 38. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, children's illnesses and financial setbacks. They had argued and made up, struggled and triumphed, always together. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Vivian asked, leaning against Yates's shoulder. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you standing beside that broken wagon," Yates said. "Other times it feels like I have known you my entire life." "I was so scared that day," Vivian admitted. "Alone in the desert with no idea how to fix my situation. And then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even thought to say." "I almost rode past," Yates confessed. "I saw your wagon in the distance and thought about just continuing on my way. I had my own problems back then, my own loneliness. But something made me stop, made me check to see if you needed help." "I will always be grateful that you listened to that something," Vivian said. "You gave me everything, Yates. A home, a family, a partnership that makes every day better. You gave me a life I did not even know I wanted." "You gave me those things too," Yates said, turning to face her. "Before you, I was just drifting, never staying anywhere long enough to build anything real. You made me want to put down roots to create something lasting. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to look forward to tomorrow." They kissed there under the cottonwood trees, a kiss that held 10 years of shared history, of love deepened by time and experience. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "Here is to the next 10 years," Vivian said. "And the 10 after that," Yates added, "and all the years to come." They returned home to the happy chaos of their children. James, now 9, was helping Ben with the horses. Sarah was reading to her younger siblings, 7-year-old Michael and 5-year-old Elizabeth. The house was filled with noise and life and love. That evening, after the children were in bed, Yates and Vivian sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, the desert night cool and peaceful. "Do you ever miss it?" Yates asked. "Your old life in San Francisco, the society parties, the sophistication," Vivian laughed softly. "Not even for a moment. That life felt like a costume I was wearing, always a little uncomfortable, never quite fitting right. This life, our life, this is who I really am." "I never knew I could be this happy, Yates. I never knew life could be this full." "I know what you mean," Yates said, pulling her close. "Every day with you is better than I ever imagined my life could be." As they sat together in the comfortable silence of long companionship, Vivian thought back to that scorching day in the desert when her wagon wheel had shattered. At the time, it had seemed like a disaster, a frightening setback in an already uncertain journey. But that broken wheel had brought her to Yates, had set in motion a chain of events that led to this life, this love, this family. Sometimes, she reflected, the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes getting lost helps you find where you truly belong. And sometimes, the person you need most appears exactly when you need them, like a cowboy materializing out of the desert heat to fix your wagon, and in the process, your entire life. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business, becoming an invaluable help on the ranch. Sarah proved to be a natural leader, organizing her siblings and eventually becoming a teacher like Emma, who had mentored her. Michael was the gentle one, more interested in books and learning than ranch work, and his parents supported his dreams of becoming a doctor. Elizabeth was the firecracker, fearless and adventurous, reminding Yates of Vivian on that first day they met. The ranch continued to expand. Yates and Vivian bought adjoining land as it became available, growing their operation while maintaining the quality that had built their reputation. They hired more help, creating jobs for young men in the area and becoming respected members of the business community. The boarding house remained successful under Vivian's management. She eventually brought Sarah into the business, training her to eventually take over, creating a legacy that would span generations. The establishment became known as one of the finest boarding houses in Southern California, a reputation built on Vivian's attention to detail and genuine care for her guests. Margaret lived to see all 4 of her great nieces and nephews grow into fine young adults. She passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. content in the knowledge that Vivian had built a good life and that the boarding house would continue to thrive. Her funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched over her years in Mojave. As Vivian and Yates entered their middle years, they found new appreciation for the life they had built. Their children began making their own ways in the world. James married a rancher's daughter and took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Sarah married a lawyer from town and continued running the boarding house while raising her own children. Michael went east for medical school, with his parents' full support and pride. Elizabeth, true to her adventurous nature, became one of the first female journalists in California, writing stories that captured the changing face of the West. Vivian and Yates became grandparents, delighting in the next generation. They watched their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had grown up, running through the same dusty earth, learning to ride the same gentle horses. The cycle of life continued, each generation building on what came before. On their 25th anniversary, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and family came from miles around to honor the couple who had become pillars of their community. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and stories about the early days. When it came time for Yates to speak, he stood with Vivian beside him, his arm around her waist. At 53, he still had the bearing of a cowboy, though his dark hair was now streaked with silver. Vivian, at 48, had laugh lines around her eyes and gray threads in her hair, signs of a life well lived. 25 years ago, Yates began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. I was riding through the desert, alone and aimless, when I came across a beautiful woman with a broken wagon. I had no idea that stopping to help her would be the best decision of my life. Vivian, you have given me everything. You have made me a better man, a better father, a better person. Every day with you is a gift, and I look forward to spending however many more days God grants us together. There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Vivian reached up to kiss her husband. Their love had become legendary in Mojave. The story of the stranded woman and the cowboy who fixed her wagon told and retold until it took on the quality of fairy tale. But those who knew them understood that the real story was even better than the legend, a story of partnership and respect and love that grew deeper with each passing year. As the celebration continued around them, Yates and Vivian slipped away for a moment of quiet. They walked to the edge of their property, looking out over the land they had built their life upon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, just as it had been doing for the 25 years they had been together. You remember what you said that first night? Vivian asked. When we were sitting by the campfire, I said a lot of things, Yates replied with a smile. Which part are you thinking of? You said you wondered what it would be like to have a home, a family, someone to share the good days and the hard ones with. Do you feel like you found what you were looking for? Yates pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I found more than I was looking for. I found everything I needed and things I did not even know I wanted. I found you, and that was the greatest treasure of all. I love you, Yates Calloway, Vivian said, the same words she had spoken countless times but which never lost their meaning. I love you too, Vivian Calloway, Yates replied. From that first moment in the desert to this moment right now and every moment yet to come. They stood together as the sun set on another day in their life together, surrounded by the land they had made their own, supported by the family they had created, held by a love that had proven stronger than any challenge. The broken wagon wheel that had brought them together was long gone, replaced by sturdy wheels that had carried them through decades of life. But neither of them would ever forget that hot August day in 1882, when fate, disguised as a mechanical failure, had brought two lonely souls together and changed both their lives forever. As the years continued to advance, Yates and Yates settled into a comfortable rhythm. They gradually handed more responsibilities to their children, allowing themselves time to simply enjoy each other's company. They took long rides through the desert, just the two of them, revisiting the places that held meaning in their shared history. The spot where her wagon had broken down, the oasis where he had proposed, the church where they had married. Each place held memories that grew more precious with time. They faced challenges together as they always had. When a severe drought hit the region, threatening their livestock and livelihood, they worked with their neighbors to share resources and survive the hard times. When illness swept through the town, they opened their home to those who needed care, Vivian nursing the sick with the same gentle competence she had shown in everything she did. Their love story inspired others in the community. Young couples would seek their advice, asking how they had maintained such a strong marriage through so many years. The answer was always simple: respect, communication, and a willingness to face life's challenges together rather than alone. As they entered their 60s, Vivian and Yates finally stepped back from active management of their businesses, trusting their children to continue the legacies they had built. They spent their days in simpler pursuits, tending a garden, reading together on the porch, playing with their growing number of grandchildren. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching yet another spectacular desert sunset, Vivian took Yates's hand. His hands were more weathered now, marked by decades of hard work, but his touch was still as gentle as it had been that first day. "I have been thinking," Vivian said, "about that day my wagon broke down." "I think about it often," Yates admitted. "How different both our lives would have been if I had taken a different road, if you had chosen a different day to travel." "I do not believe in random chance anymore," Vivian said. "I think we were meant to meet." All the events that led to that moment, your parents bringing you west, my father passing away, my aunt inviting me to Mojave, even the wagon wheel breaking at exactly that spot. It all had to happen exactly that way for us to find each other. "You might be right," Yates said. "And I am grateful for every bit of it, even the hard parts, because they all led me to you." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the colors fade from the sky. Around them, their land stretched in every direction, a testament to what they had built together. Inside the house, they could hear the voices of their grandchildren visiting for the weekend. The next generation, full of life and possibility. "We had a good life, did we not?" Vivian asked softly. "The best," Yates confirmed. "The very best." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Vivian leaned against Yates's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. This man who had appeared out of nowhere to fix her wagon had fixed so much more than that. He had given her a life full of love and purpose, had stood beside her through every joy and sorrow, had proved every day that true love was not just a fairy tale but something real and lasting. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Yates asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "For stopping that day, for helping a stranded woman, for following me to town, for asking me to marry you, for building this life with me, for everything." "Thank you for saying yes," Yates replied, "to all of it." They remained on the porch long after the sun had fully set, wrapped in each other's arms and the warmth of decades of shared love. The desert night sang its timeless song around them, the same song it had been singing since that fateful day when a wagon wheel broke and two souls found each other in the vast emptiness. It was a song of hope and love and the beautiful, unpredictable nature of life. And as they finally rose to go inside, Yates paused to take one last look at the land they loved, the home they had built, the life they had created from a chance meeting on a desert road. He smiled, pulling Vivian close, knowing that every moment had been worth it. Every challenge, every struggle, every triumph had led them here, to this perfect evening, still together, still in love, still grateful for a broken wagon wheel and the cowboy who had known how to fix it. Inside, surrounded by family, they shared stories and laughter late into the night. The tale of how they met was told again, embellished slightly by time and repetition, but still true in all the ways that mattered. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, already sensing that their grandparents' story was special, a testament to the kind of love that people spend their whole lives hoping to find. As Vivian and Yates finally retired to their room that night, they moved with the comfortable familiarity of a lifetime together. They had shared this room, this bed, for over 3 decades, had weathered everything life could throw at them, and had emerged with their love not just intact but strengthened. "Good night, my love," Yates whispered as they settled in, his arm around Vivian just as it had been on countless nights before. "Good night," Vivian replied, fitting herself against him perfectly as if they had been designed to go together. And so they slept, these two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built a beautiful life from a chance encounter and a broken wagon wheel, who had proved that sometimes the best stories begin with a crisis and a kind stranger willing to help. Their love had become a legacy, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a reminder that true love exists and that sometimes fate brings exactly the right person to you exactly when you need them most. The story of Vivian and Yates Calloway became part of the history of Mojave, told and retold for generations. The ranch they built continued to thrive, managed by their descendants. The boarding house remained a landmark in town, a testament to Vivian's business acumen and warm hospitality. But more than any physical legacy, they left behind an example of what a true partnership could be, what love looked like when it was built on respect, honesty, and unwavering commitment. Years later, when Yates and Vivian had both passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, unable to bear long separation even in the end, their children gathered to honor their memory. They stood on the porch of the ranch house, looking out over the land their parents had loved, and told their children about the day a wagon wheel broke in the desert and changed everything. "Your grandmother was stranded," James told his own children. "The wheel on her wagon shattered in the middle of nowhere. She thought she was facing disaster. But then your grandfather came riding up, a cowboy with kind eyes and capable hands. He fixed her wagon, followed her to town to make sure she arrived safely, and then he stayed. He stayed because he had found what he had been searching for all along, even though he had not known he was searching." "They fell in love," Sarah added, her voice soft with emotion. "Not the shallow, fleeting kind of love, but the deep, lasting kind that grows stronger with time. They built this ranch together, raised a family together, faced every challenge together. They showed us what marriage should be, what partnership should look like." "And they were happy," Michael said, a doctor now with his own successful practice, but always grateful for the support his parents had given his dreams. "Through all the years, through all the ups and downs, they were happy, because they had each other." "They had a great love story," Elizabeth concluded, having written her parents' story for a magazine article that would be read by thousands. The kind of love story that reminds us all that sometimes, when everything seems to be going wrong, fate is actually leading you exactly where you need to be. The grandchildren listened, absorbing the story, understanding that they carried within them the legacy of that love. They learned that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, that helping others is always worthwhile, and that true love, when you find it, is worth holding on to with everything you have. And somewhere in the vast desert night, if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of wagon wheels on a dusty road, the sound of a horse approaching, and the beginning of a love story that would last through generations. The story of a woman who was stranded when her wagon broke, and the cowboy who fixed it and followed her to town, and in doing so, found his home, his heart, and his forever. The end.